Welcome back to the Forefathers Podcast, where we have honest conversations with men striving to lead with purpose, build with intention, and to leave a legacy that extends beyond themselves. Today's guest is a husband, father, entrepreneur, and leader who has built a life around creating impact. While many know him for his work in business and branding, today we're stepping beyond the professional realm to explore the man behind the work, his values, his challenges, the lessons that have shaped him, and what it means to lead in today's world. Today, we're exploring purpose, character, resilience, fatherhood, and the responsibility men have to lead and leave a meaningful legacy. Tendai, my brother, thank you so much for joining us.
All love, man. Thank you so much.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. And I think before we dive into it, it would be great to just give the audience a bit of a background as to who Tendai is and what you stand for before we dive in.
Yeah, so I'm Tendai Luwo. I'm business strategist by profession and husband, father to 3 boys. And I live for just seeing, businesses and people become the best versions of themselves.
Got you. Thanks a lot for that, Tendai. And again, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. I'm really looking forward to the conversation we're going to have today. I've been following your journey and just, learning from you.
Yeah.
So I, for one, can say I've learned quite a bit from you, and I'm excited for others to begin to learn from you as well.
Yeah, thanks.
So just starting off, I want you to take us back to the beginning so that we can understand what experiences in your childhood and early life kind of shaped the person we see today, the man that you are now.
Geez, how far back do we go? So, early childhood, born in the early 90s in Bulawayo, Zimbabwe, second biggest city in the country. Very interesting background. My mom, was a teacher. In fact, she still is a teacher. My dad was a sales rep, and then he went on to become an entrepreneur. But, I grew up in a very loving home, big push towards, culture, the arts, education, although I didn't make them as happy as they could have been on that education front.
Yeah.
Went to a couple of really awesome schools in Zim. And then, we as a family moved to South Africa a little bit later. So I started here in university. And it's just been a journey and a career of, exploring entertainment, broadcast, later on marketing, and now entrepreneurship.
That's amazing. Thanks a lot for sharing that. I think it gives us a bit of context into who you are and some of the pieces of the journey that make you who you are and who we see today. And, from time to time on the podcast, we have different definitions of manhood.
Yeah.
Right. And what you find is that definition is no longer constant. Right. And it's always interesting to see how each individual defines manhood. So what I want to know from you is, from your point of view, how do you define manhood?
So I believe manhood is rooted in perhaps 3 basic things, right? Accountability, perseverance, and purpose, right? Are you able to take ownership of your decisions, of, where life is placing you in that particular moment? Are you able to take ownership of just everything that's in and around you and that's in your control? Are you then also able to persevere through the tough seasons? Because I do think, perhaps it's a bit of a gloomy statement, but I think to live is to suffer, right? I think there's a lot you will encounter throughout this journey of life. Some of the stuff is your own doing. Some of the stuff is just things that happen, right? You lose a loved one. Things change at work. Are you able to persevere through all those seasons? And then lastly, purpose. Do you have a very clear image and picture of where you want to go? And are you actively pursuing that particular purpose?
I like that. And purpose, I want to touch a bit more on that. How do we assist someone who is, let's call him 19, who is watching this right now and he says, Tendai, I hear what you're saying about purpose, but how do I find my purpose? I do not know who I want to become, but I want to. Is there a way? Is there a method? for somebody to discover what they've been called to do? Or is there anything that we can assist an individual who says, I'm not sure what I've been called to do?
So I think there's a balance, right? So I think on one side of it, your purpose is somewhat innate, it's within, and in the sense that you probably have had it for like since you were born, right? It might not have fully come to fruition, but there's that niggling feeling that, oh, I'm really good at speaking to people, or I'm really good at figuring out a problem, or I'm really good at sports. But there's something where somewhere in the depth of your soul, you'll feel that, I think I'm being led here.
Yeah.
That being said, I think the other side is try and experience as much of life as possible in your earlier years, right? So if you have the means, try and travel. If you don't have the means, read books, find mentors, young, old. Just expose yourself to as much things as possible, because through that exposure, you then start to get closer and closer to that point where you're like, okay, that's not for me, this is for me.
I hear you. So you're able to actually discover and unearth what's inside you by actually being able to say, this is not who I am. This is more of my inclination of who I've been called to.
Yeah. Of which I think sometimes, 19 is young.
Yeah.
I was saying to you earlier that I'm in my 30s, and it's only now where it's clicked that, hold on, I'm still a baby. I'm a youth,
Yeah.
So if you're 19, I think don't put too much pressure on yourself to have it all figured out.
Yeah.
I think generally for men, I would say from my personal experience and also through my mentors, it starts to come right in your 40s, right? So your 30s, it starts to balance out.
Yeah.
Your 40s, now you're in full stride. So 19, you've got plenty of time to work with.
Got you. But the intention still needs to be there.
100%.
To say, I want to be a person who leads his life with purpose.
Yes. Yeah.
Got you. And another thing that I've noticed is that for somebody to become like yourself, right, a leader in his own right, there has to be a lot of pieces at play. The saying, it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
I do believe it takes wise counsel to make a leader as well. That's an addition they could probably add to that saying. So what I want to know from you is, who helped shape the person that you are today? And what are some of the lessons that they taught you to become this person?
Yeah. So I think there were different people for different seasons, right? Mm-hmm. If I look at my early childhood, so pre-teens, I spent a fair bit of time with my dad. So by that time, he was now becoming an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. So I watched how he related to people as a boss. Mm-hmm. And I found he was quite a fair and just, he's one of the few people I know who could easily claim, that person worked for me for 7 years, 10 years, 15 years. All his staff typically stayed for a long time. And I've tried to emulate that. Mm-hmm. When I look at my teenage years, it was my uncle McLeod, who is my mom's younger brother, mm-hmm. Incredible people skills. Like he just walks into a room and lights it up, mm-hmm. And so I think navigating different rooms, I learned that from him. Mm-hmm. In my 20s, it was actually a gentleman by the name of Igor Francisco, right? Okay. I'm not sure where he is now, but he was the quintessential cool guy, right? So I went through my hippie era where, I was you're thrifting clothes, you're hanging out in Bram. You can picture the vibe.
I see it.
And Igor just came through with a different swagger. The one thing he said to me at that time, he was like, you need to ask yourself, who is this person in the bigger scheme of things? So I was going through something where I'm like, oh, I'm disagreeing with this person. And he said, yeah, but in the bigger picture, like in terms of where you're trying to go, is this person consequential? And what he was trying to make me understand is sometimes we get caught up in the small things. Mm-hmm. And, you need to keep focused on the vision. Mm-hmm. As I evolved into my late 20s and then my 30s, I'd say it was probably a gentleman by the name of Daniel Maimba.
Okay.
He taught me the power of, family, mm-hmm. And also focusing on the right things, right? So, he's an incredible entrepreneur, highly devoted to his family, highly devoted to just living a full life. Mm-hmm. And those are things, a lot of us are influenced by what you see on social media, or if you're like me, you grew up on hip hop, right? So you're like, okay, when I get my money right, I'm going to be like this, I'm going to be like that. And it's like, no, chill, youngin. Like, why don't you, go fishing, play golf, spend time outdoors, take your family on trips. So all those things started to change my perception. And then in that, you take all those different pieces and eventually get to a point where like, this is who I am based on these experiences.
That's powerful. I like how you mentioned there was different people for different seasons. What I'm curious to know is, were these people planted in your life by coincidence? Obviously, you've got your uncle, et cetera, and the people who are your immediate family, right?
Yeah.
But what I want to know is, did you intentionally go seeking these mentors, or as life would have it, you ended up crossing paths with them?
So it was purely serendipitous, right? I think when you try and actively like force someone to be a mentor, it becomes a little bit different. I think it works a little bit smoother when it's almost organic.
Yeah.
Because on the mentor side, I've had people who've messaged me, hey, can you be my mentor? And I'm like, listen, I'm also still figuring this thing out. Like now you're putting pressure on me. Now I'm asking, am I a good mentor? Am I a bad mentor? So all these people I've spoken to, none of them could say, I signed up to be Tendai's mentor. They were just being them.
Yeah.
And through, whatever resonance in that relationship, I was like, okay, I want to emulate that. So it happened purely by chance, but that ability to take note and learn and observe is what then made those interactions worthwhile. Got you.
So it was an organic occurrence that they ended up being such influential figures in your life.
Yeah.
Got you. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. What I want to know is, you see how you've broken down how there were a lot of pieces into making this man that we see. What do we say to the young man who's watching and he says, look, there's no father figure or male figure in my life that I can relate to, or that is teaching me how to become a man in my close proximity? What do we say to him, and where should he begin in his journey to becoming a man?
So I'll answer that by using an example I give as a business strategist, right? Mm-hmm. And, someone will say, oh, I need a mentor to help me be a better entrepreneur. And I say, you don't need mentors, you need heroes. Mm-hmm. Because mentor is this, right? Mm-hmm. It's one-on-one. Are you available at Sunday on 3 p.m.? Can I meet you? Can you take a call? It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Instead, a hero can be anyone, right? Like we all grew up and you saw Superman.
Yeah.
You never met Superman, right? But you saw how strong he was. You saw how he protected his city. You saw how he cared for Lewis Lane. Mm-hmm. You observed him from far. So I think the same thing applies to these young men, to say, it's unfortunate if you don't have a direct father figure, mm-hmm. but there are father figures you can emulate. J. Cole talks about, first things first, rest in peace, Uncle Phil, mm-hmm. right? Why? Because Uncle Phil from The Fresh Prince, that was a father figure to a lot of young black men in American society.
Yeah.
Even though he was a completely fictional character.
Yeah.
For me, I think a lot of my more spiritual teachings comes from like a Miles Monroe.
Yes.
And I never had the opportunity to meet Miles, but that's who I would then look at and say, okay, cool. This is someone who disseminates the word and articulates things in a way I normally wouldn't understand. Yeah. So don't put the burden of physical presence. Mm-hmm. I think seek out, read books, watch videos, seek out these different people. We're in an information age. Mm-hmm. And eventually, as you also grow, I do believe God starts to put people in your life as you need them.
That's powerful. So essentially, although you may not have the physical presence of a male figure in your life, they're still out there. There's the likes of Miles Monroe that you just mentioned, powerful man, by the way, and being able to connect to men that we can resonate with, be that in books, your Napoleon Hills, you're able to reach out to those sorts of people and not feel that because there isn't a physical presence that of course, yes, it's unfortunate that, the father figure is not there in the flesh.
Yeah.
But this is a solution to ensuring that you're still able to cultivate a life that is guided by principle.
Yes.
Gotcha.
100%.
Okay, got you. And interestingly enough, you mentioned Uncle Phil and all these characters that, we grew up on that were somewhat an inspiration to a lot of us. What are your thoughts on the television that is being consumed by the younger generation? Do you feel we still have the shows that are giving young men somebody that they could aspire to be, or has that reduced, or it's not a cause of concern? If people really want to find someone they can resonate with, it's still out there. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think there has been a degradation in the moral fabric.
Okay.
I give the example of, and I don't know if I want to name the shows, but, there's a particular show my mom and I used to enjoy, which was like a church drama series, right? It was based on this massive mega church and the trials and tribulations that the family had, right? Let's just say that Greenleaf.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And then you watch Greenleaf, and at a certain point, it then has, these scenes where you're like, is this still a,
Yeah.
I mean, growing up, what used to happen is if there was some form of intimate scene, the door would just close and it would be suggested,
Yeah.
right? Now we're full on, showing these things. So I do think in a broader scheme of things, we have that challenge. But I think TV is no different to music in that you can still pick and choose, right? So you can go out and seek the content that you think resonates with you, the content that you think, okay, this, feeds into my spirit. So broadly, is the stuff on TV good? No. But does that mean there's nothing good out there? I'd also say, I think there's still some great shows that people could watch.
I agree. And thanks for breaking that down. I guess that leads us into our next question. What do you feel is the biggest challenge that young men are facing today? And what do you think the responsibility that old men have in terms of helping to guide the next generation?
I think there's two issues with, I'll say we, right? Because I'm still a young man. There's two issues that are being faced. I think there's a crisis of fatherhood and there's a crisis of identity.
Okay.
Right. Let's start with the crisis of fatherhood. I think one of the challenges is a lot of people don't know how to be fathers, and it's not an easy thing. Heading a household is incredibly taxing. I think your mind is always turning, right? Whether you're thinking about it financially, whether you're thinking about it from a security perspective, there's just so many dynamics that you're juggling at any given moment. And so the danger in that is that you can find yourself, and I'm speaking, in terms of the fathers, you can find yourself in a situation where you are seeking safety and solitude in other avenues. So you're like, okay, I'm stressed, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm going through all these things. Okay, Friday has come, I just need to go and drink. Right? Saturday has come, I just need to go and hang with the boys. You're constantly searching for reprieve outside of the home. And in doing that, you're neglecting the home. Because remember, from 9 to 5, you're working, you're grinding. In the evening, your mind is still turning. So you're not actually present. You're providing, you're making things happen, but you're not present. And so that then has a certain knock-on effect where the boys, you watch a show like The Polygamist. That's a great example in the sense that, Jonas provided for his family. By what we were raised to believe a man is, he ticked a lot of those boxes. He sent his kids to good schools. He put them in a beautiful home. He made sure they were clothed. He took them on trips. He did the things we previously believed that's what being a dad is, right? But we saw with his son, he completely neglected the actual essence of fatherhood, the nurturing, the guiding, the, raising a child up in ways of the Lord. Completely missed that. So I think that's the one side. The second side is in the crisis of identity.
Yes.
Where a lot of us young men still don't know who we are. Right? So who am I when my wife makes as much money as me? Who am I when I evolve from, I'm a young 20-something-year-old and now I'm the head of the house, right? That's a transition. Who am I now? I grew up without money. Now I have money, right? Those are all the things which we don't have a clear playbook. And so we then struggle to find ourselves. And unfortunately, some of us get lost. Some of us, it does eventually make sense.
Right. Thanks for that, Tendai. That really breaks down what young men are currently facing in terms of the identity crisis, which I do believe is a crisis because, as you mentioned, there's so many transitions for a young man to face that you have to kind of rediscover yourself. And if there aren't the certain pillars in place already, you might get lost, to your point. And also, I like the example of the fatherhood crisis that we currently have. And now that we've kind of painted the picture of what the problem is, do you believe that the older generation has a responsibility to play in terms of helping to guide the younger generation that may be going through these challenges at the moment?
I certainly believe so. I think to the best of our ability, we need to share what we've learned thus far. And I think those who are even older than us also need to, you come back down the proverbial ladder and say, hey, as you're coming up, take these steps, skip that one, do this, do that. I think we can't leave this thing to chance. I think we need to be incredibly intentional about how we guide and support these young men. There's a gentleman by the name of John Brown. So he's the father of 3 college football athletes, and then 2 made it to the NFL. So I think Aquanimia St. Brown made it, and the other names are escaping me. But yeah, he's got 3 sons. And so a lot of people asking me, how did you get these 3 sons to become professional athletes? What is your... And one of the things he always says, there's no such a thing as a lazy child, only a lazy parent.
Wow.
Right? So when you're like, oh yeah, Tendai doesn't wake up in the morning. It's like, no. Did you wake up in the morning to wake him up? Did you set that tone? Did you set that pace? So I share that because I think the same thing applies to these kids where we're complaining and saying, oh, this generation. But have we done the work?
Sure.
Did we, or are we just handing them iPads and iPhones and saying, oh yeah, sort yourself out? So I think there's a massive burden to support the young generation as the older ones.
Yeah. No, what you just said literally just blew my mind. There's no such thing as a lazy child, only a lazy parent. And I think it really, it makes you start to think, right? How quickly we can point fingers to say, this generation is not able to do this. This generation is not able to do this. But have we intentionally taught them these skills that we are saying are lacking, right?
Yeah.
So that's really powerful. And if that's a message that, the viewers at home can take, that's definitely something to highlight there. And I want to get closer into you as a person. Your daily habits, right? Or disciplines that you may practice, are there any that you feel played a significant role in shaping the man that you are? The things that you do daily, or some of the disciplines that you practice, are there any that you feel, oh no, this and that were really good for me because?
Yeah. So I think there's 2 that immediately come to mind. The first is health.
Okay.
And from a health perspective, it's not something that came naturally, right? But my wife always laughs when I say she's a bit of a hypochondriac. So she forced me into, okay, dude, you need a medical aid, right? And she's like, dude, you need to go for checkups. I'm like, really? I'm not sick. She's like, no, go for checkups. So I never used to do those things. But once I got into it, regular blood tests, all those little things, you gain such a deep insight into your body. And it might sound mundane, but those are the little things that give you a competitive edge, because I think the working world, the entrepreneurial world is hectic. So I pay a lot more focus on my health. I'm, currently on a weight loss journey. I'm investing a lot more in my well-being than I did before. I always say, a lot of us say would die for our children, but would you live for them? Right? And by live for them, that is, are you healthy? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you making sure you just have the physiological energy to be a present parent? Right? So that's the one thing that's changed quite a bit. And then the other one is just from a psychological side of things, right? Just taking care of, I don't want to say mental health. I think the word is used, it is a bit overdone, but taking care of your well-being psychologically, right? Simple things like, do you think about your thoughts, right? If you read Eckhart Tolle, he says, oh, what a blessing it is to know that the voice in my head is not me, right? And then someone say, oh, so who am I? You are the person who's aware that voice is not you.
Okay.
Right? Because your voice, like that voice in your head will tell you a whole lot of terrible stuff.
Yeah.
Right? So I try and invest time in thinking about my thoughts. When my voice is saying, oh, this is the limit, I say, okay, why is it saying that? So those are basically the two things. Take care of your body, take care of your mind.
I like that. Body and mind. And you mentioned something about how you are not that voice in your head. And I think a lot of people get caught up in that, and try and not being able to differentiate between the voice and self, and it's important that you actually mention that, because although the mental health has been a bit overdone, I think it's being overdone because of the fact that it's a real crisis, and these conversations help. And that particular thing that you just mentioned in regards to you not being your thoughts could probably and arguably save somebody's life, because we've got people out there who have really dark thoughts and they could feel like that's who they are. But being able to differentiate from the fact that, no, this is just a thought. There's a saying, I might not be able to get it all the way right, but essentially what it suggests is that the thoughts are birds, and it's okay for birds to fly across your head. But the problem is when that bird creates a nest on your head now, because it's here to stay now. You need to be able to recognize that the thoughts are they're passing, I
love that. Yeah.
To take note of that. But then when they now create a nest, we have a bit of a problem there. There's an exercise myself and a friend did. I said to him, bro, I want you to track what you say to yourself consistently, right? It's like, but how do I do that? I was like, it will come to you. You'll see. You will notice what you say to yourself more often. And I was able to realize what I say to myself most often. I did this for 7 days.
Yeah.
I'd be like, okay, I'm going to write down what it is that I'm saying to myself. And it's a good exercise that I'll challenge people to do, because believe you me, you are saying more often than not, the thing that you're saying to yourself is always consistent. You're always saying very similar things to yourself. And it's important to actually investigate, is what I'm saying to myself positive? Is what I'm saying to myself building the person I want to become? And those are some of the things I just wanted to add. Then when it comes to life and its uncertainties, I believe as an entrepreneur, there are a number of uncertainties that you have to face on a daily basis. I want to know how you deal with those uncertainties and what essentially anchors or keeps you grounded when these uncertainties come your way.
So I developed a little trick. Whenever those uncertainties or tough periods come around, I have said to myself, oh my gosh, this is going to make such a great chapter in the biography.
Oof.
So it's not like it doesn't, weigh on you heavily. Yeah. But I've just mentally told myself that this is just part of the story. And the story would be quite boring if it was smooth sailing the whole way. Yeah. I love the show I Shouldn't Be Alive, because you see this like dramatized narrative of, oh, this person was abandoned at sea for 72 days. Like it's ridiculous, right? Yeah. but it's so captivating to watch it. Now, if the story was, oh, this person went on a cruise ship and, the ship left to the Americas and arrived in Africa and everything was good, you're not going to watch it. But if you hear, halfway through it then sprung a leak and then he had to fight sharks and then, now you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So that's the same way I look at it. I just say, look, it's just a part and parcel of the journey. It's inevitable that you're going to have highs and lows, but it makes the highs that much sweeter.
I hear you. Are there any practices that you do, practical practices that we could pass on to somebody watching this in terms of when uncertainty slaps you in the face? Yes, of course, I love the perspective to say, look, life is not always going to be sweet. And in any case, when Netflix gives me a call, we need to have, these moments in the documentary. But in terms of practical steps that one can ideally take in the face of uncertainty, is there anything you can impart on that situation?
Yeah, so I think maybe one of the frameworks there would be to simply ask yourself, like, okay, is this I'm going to use, his name is escaping me, Myron Golden. Yep. I need to ask, is this a determining factor towards me building my dreams, or is this a contributing factor? So determining means I didn't get the loan, I can't start, it's finished. I need to find something else. Contributing means, okay, this is a hurdle, this is a stumbling block, let me look for a different direction, And he speaks about that in the context of, people say, oh, I'm black, so I can't do something. Like, that's not true. It's a contributing factor. It might present some challenges, but it's not a determining factor. So that's one framework. And then equally, I think my own version of it is then simply asking myself, is there something that I can change? If not, then I can't, there's no benefit to being stressed out about it. If it is something that I can change, writing down what are the things that I need to do to change it. If you look up the, and I hope I don't butcher this, I think it's called the Harada method, where it's basically you can write the problem down in a square and then you put 8 squares around it, right? So square in the middle, then square diagonally, square diagonally, square diagonally, square diagonally, square on top, square on at the side, at the bottom. Yeah. But you basically break down the problem like that. Core problem, what are the first layers of things that I need to do to solve it? What are the next layers? What are the next layers? I see that. So those are some of the ways I would tackle it. Thanks
for breaking down that framework. Really sounds like something practical and that someone can actually utilize. And I also liked how you mentioned, if it's something that I can't change, there's no point in dwelling on that. Yeah. Let's focus on what we can change and actually be intentional and take action towards changing that. If we can't change it, then so be it. We pray and we leave it to God. The next thing I want to know from you is vulnerability, right? In your experience, why do you think men struggle, or rather find it difficult to be vulnerable? And how can we begin to alter and change that? If it needs to be changed, maybe it does, in your opinion, it doesn't need to be changed.
So I don't think we struggle to be vulnerable, but I think we sometimes struggle to find the safe spaces or the right places to be vulnerable. Okay. So, I went to Rhodes University. So the one thing about Rhodes, they'll tell you is that we know how to drink, right? we imbibe quite a bit, right? Yeah. And if you've been, and I don't anymore, but if you're in that culture, you do often see how, a friend will get, a little bit intoxicated and then they'll open up, dude, I'm going through this, I miss her so much, why isn't this happening? So we do open up. We just might not be opening up in the right spaces. So it might be substance induced to get to a point where you're like, oh, this is what's, on my heart. Or you might be opening up to friends who don't have the emotional depth and skills to navigate what you're going through emotionally. So I think it's not so much a matter of should you open up. I think we all do at one point or another, but it's more a matter of, have you found and cultivated the spaces where it's safe to open up? This could be your spouse. This could be, I've found churches in certain contexts are great spaces, particularly in the smaller groups. So like cell groups, I think are amazing. I think the actual service, but cell groups, I love cell groups. Like I actually feel cell groups here and then the Sunday service there. That's my philosophy. So yeah, I think just build a space where you feel safe enough. Find the people. They are there. They exist. They won't come overnight, but they exist.
Yeah. So it's a case of actually being intentional to build these spaces for yourself, right?
Yeah.
So you as an individual need to make sure that you have an individual where you can be open and vulnerable with. And it's the role and the responsibility to create that spaces on you as an individual.
Yes, but also, so two things with that, right? One, understand that you might need to build different spaces for different things.
Okay.
The people I speak to about business are not the people I speak to about marriage.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Don't place the burden on one person to be the entire thing. You know, I think it even goes for marriage. I think sometimes we just want to pour and pour and pour on top of our significant others when you're like, that's not fair. You know, they can't be all these roles. You know, so that's, I think, the one side. I think the other side to it is also, don't be hard on yourself if it doesn't work the first time. So, you know, someone will say, you know, I opened up to my girlfriend and she laughed at me, right? I'm never opening up to a woman again.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make sense. You know, no one has ever said, you know, I was in a relationship when I was 19 and they broke my heart. I'm never dating again. You try again, right?
Yeah.
You go and look for new people.
Yeah.
The same thing applies. You might have the unfortunate encounter where someone you opened up to misused that trust you had in them, but that shouldn't stop you from finding other safe spaces that are, you know, better suited.
And I think as funny as that may sound, right, in regards to saying I opened up to this one person and this person laughed at me, but the reality is there are a lot of men out there who genuinely feel that because of this one occurrence, everybody else is going to treat them the same. But to your point, no one says, because I dated and then I got my heart broken at 19, I'm never dating again. Or because I failed this test, I'm never going back to school again. No, you keep trying, right? That's what life's about. And I just want to encourage the men out there to not think that the one bad experience that you had in terms of being vulnerable is what it is with everybody. You have to be willing to, you know, to try again and to start from zero in terms of creating these spaces where you can be vulnerable and you can be able to build a community of brothers that are sharpening each other to become the people they aspire to be. So thanks for breaking that down, brother. And then just taking a closer look at you, my brother, in terms of who you are. You're a husband, you're a father, you're an entrepreneur. I want to know how you balance the never-ending chase for success and your ambitions with being present for your family.
Yeah, that's a great one. So my philosophy is there's basically three buckets, and it's challenging for them to be full at the same time.
Okay.
And the three being, you know, your business and your career, your family, and your health, right? So I believe in a philosophy of trade-off. So you sort of weigh at any given moment and say, okay, cool. If I've got 10 chips, I'm going to give, maybe in this season, I'll give 4 to the business and my career. I'll give 4 to my family and 2 to my health. Now, that doesn't mean you let your health go, but you're just like, okay, look, I don't have the capacity to be in the gym every day and all these things I want to do. Maybe I just have to then taper down my you know, health regimen. Or there's seasons where you have to sit with the family and say, guys, I'm in a building season. I can only give you guys 1 chip. And that 1 chip is a Saturday morning. We'll go and do a family thing, but I then need to get back into the office. Please bear with me for 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever that thing may be. But if you accept that, you know, it's very difficult to have all those buckets full, and then you work around it, and then you have those conversations, whether it's with yourself or with your family, I think that makes it a bit easier to manage. The one thing you did say that I wanted to push back on is the never-ending pursuit of success. I think it's very important to have a finish line. I'm very clear about what my goal is financially. I've always said with I don't know if we should get into the numbers.
No, let's do that. Let's get to it.
So I've always said with one of my close friends, I think the sweet spot is somewhere between 5 and 20 million US, right? And I say that because at that figure, when you are taking down 6-7%, it is enough to give you a super comfortable upper middle class life, right? So the pursuit is, can I build assets that get to that point? And it takes time. It's not something that most people achieve in their 30s, probably late 40s, early 50s, but have that thing in mind, because when you don't, you won't stop working. You know, and that's how you get to that point where you're 60, 70 and you're like, okay, I've amassed all of this, but I don't know my family. You know, I never spend time with my kids. There's so many successful people I've met who have that burden of like, if I had known, I would have stopped at a certain point.
That's powerful. And a lot of people speak about the importance of having that figure there. Napoleon Hill is a big, I love Napoleon Hill. I think I read Think and Grow Rich once every year.
Okay.
It's a powerful book, and he speaks about being specific about that figure. Firstly, in terms of programming your brain to identify those opportunities for yourself, right? So that you can see when those opportunities arise. But beyond that, to your point, you're able to actually say, this is my finish line. And I'll like, you will be my case study. As soon as you hit that 20 mil mark, I want to give you a call to say, Tendai, are you chilling now? It's like, are you satisfied? Are you content? And have a real conversation in terms of the reality after the goal is achieved. Are we now simply at the bottom of another mountain, or are we at the top of that career mountain? You know, I'm genuinely going to give you a call when that happens, just to find out what Tendai after the fact feels about this, you know.
So I'm satisfied. I'm content now.
Oh,
I'm very content. I'm very satisfied because, you know, this is the beauty of entrepreneurship, right? You go through so many low seasons that you develop calluses, right? And you develop enough calluses where you realize the money doesn't make me happy. It what's the word I'm looking for? It might alleviate certain stresses, right? So if I'm in a situation where I don't have to think twice about taking care of my parents, taking care of my family, you know, there's a bit of calm to that. But I'm very content. I might not have hit my financial target. I might still have incredibly tumultuous financial seasons. But I'm not waiting for the 20 million to be content.
To have that feeling of satisfaction.
The fact that my kids don't sleep hungry, there's a roof over my head. You know, I give a very practical example to say, my dream car is a Range Rover Vogue, you know, long wheelbase autobiography, you know. But I'm not waiting until I get into the Range Rover to be like, okay, now
life makes sense.
Like, all throughout the different cars I've had, I've always been like, okay, this is great. I'm happy with this. I want that, but
I'm happy with where I'm at.
I don't think anyone should ever wait until a
certain point to be happy or to be content. I like that.
You won't.
Yeah. And I think the sad reality is if we base our happiness on a certain event happening, I think we'll be very disappointed. Because now the expectation is now so high to say, to your example, once I get this car, I'm going to feel fulfilled. But you won't get that fulfillment from that. To your point, you get the fulfillment in your day by day and how you live, etc. So thanks for breaking that down.
Have you heard about hedonistic adaptation?
No, please break it down for me, brother.
So hedonistic adaptation is basically when you want something. So let's say you've always wanted a MacBook, right? You will be happy with that MacBook for a maximum of 2 weeks. Then your brain chemically adapts to a new baseline. Now, if you don't curb that thing, your brain is going to say, hold on, we need to go from a MacBook Air and we need a MacBook Pro, right? And then you'll get the MacBook Pro and you're happy for 2 weeks, and then that's now the baseline. And then you're like, no, but I need a MacBook Pro 16-inch black with 2 terabytes, 24 gigs of RAM. And you keep accumulating. So that's what you have with, let's say, a Floyd Mayweather, where you get the BMW, now you want the Mercedes, then you get the Ferrari, then you get the Lamborghini. You keep chasing and you don't stop purchasing or consuming because you keep raising your baseline, but you're never actually happier, So I think that's one of the things people need to be careful about, to realize you always go back to a baseline, and the baseline doesn't mean that you now need to look for something new.
Yeah. And I guess to your point in terms of avoiding getting to that point is already being fulfilled in self beyond chasing that next thing, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, got you. Thanks a lot for breaking that down, Tendai. And as we've mentioned, you're a father. I believe you have 3 kids. Your oldest one is 11. And I want to know what fatherhood has taught you. The biggest lesson that out of fatherhood you say, oh, wow, if I had not been a father, I probably would have not learned that. Or one of the lessons where you look at your journey as a father, and that you feel could encourage current or future fathers in terms of their own fatherhood journeys?
For me, it's accepting that I don't know what I'm doing. Right?
Yeah.
I've read the books, I've listened to the podcasts, but there'll always be something where I'm like, okay, hold on. This wasn't in the manual,
Yeah.
But understanding that, you do the best you can with what you know. And I think it's something I had to apply to my parents first. They say kura uone.
Yeah.
My dad always used to say, wait until you're a parent. And now I'm a parent. I'm like, oh, snap. The funniest one is, when your parents would say to you, I don't have money. And you're like, you're a parent. Parents always have money,
Yeah.
That was probably the one where like, oh, snap, that's what they meant, So yeah, I think for me personally, just that understanding of it's okay to not know, to not have all the answers. I think another big one has been the power of apology.
Okay.
Just any chance I get, I try and sit with my kids and say, hey, I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry I was on my phone. I'm sorry I snapped at you. I'm sorry, I wasn't attentive. Constantly reflecting day by day and saying, how did I show up today? Was I as best of a version as I could be? Because some days the tank is empty.
Yeah.
Some days I have to say, guys, I'm so sorry. I'm down. But please bear with me. We'll do something 2-3 days later, but trying my best to live in the moment, to try and be present and taking it day by day.
Gotcha. Now, thanks for breaking that down. I like how, the saying I'm sorry is such a powerful thing, because I think it's very rare that fathers say I'm sorry, simple things like that. I'm sorry, I love you, etc. So the fact that you intentionally reflect on how you show up for your kids, and you actually have it in you to sit them down and say, look, I'm sorry I couldn't do X, Y, and Z. I'm sorry I did that. That is actually a very good blueprint. And also acknowledging the fact that I'm figuring this out as I go. I don't have this is my first time being a father, right? Obviously, when you had your first kid, it's a new journey that you get on. So I like how you broke that down. It's quite interesting. We're actually drawing closer to the end of our conversation, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Before we close off, we have a few more questions for you, Tendai. And what I want to know is, as you know, a lot of men face difficult seasons, right, in their lives. And for you, when you look back, what has been the hardest season in your life, and how did God guide you, and what did he teach you through that?
I think the early stages of entrepreneurship and of marriage were two of the hardest seasons.
Gotcha.
Marriage, because there's no manual, and I think we haven't. So in African, or let me just use in Shona culture, right? When a woman gets married, there's, now we call it, like a kitchen tea was the name. I'm showing my age here. Yeah, it was called a kitchen tea, right? Where the women would come together for the afternoon and they would, impart knowledge and all of that. I'm not quite sure if we have the male equivalent.
You're right.
And so you go into this thing really not knowing and probably just drawing off just random pieces of observation and experience, like the most random things. You did a movie you saw there, an uncle you watched there. Like it's just this mishmash of things and nothing really congruent. And so unlearning that and then finding a new normal, a new baseline, a healthy baseline was quite a difficult journey.
Gotcha.
And I think I'm really grateful for the church community and the mentors that I had who, the likes of the Daniels, who steered me towards, this is what it means to be a father, right? This is what it means to be a husband. It's, fine, you've paid all the bills, but a husband isn't just the guy who pays the bills. There's more to it. Do you pay attention to your wife? Do you understand your wife? So I think that was a very difficult season to go through. Entrepreneurship, probably figuring out the human side of running a business, right? How do you actually get the right people, take care of people? How do you leave emotions at the door? How do you make money? Because when you perform entrepreneurship and it doesn't match with the reality, it can be quite stressful, because remember, the family is still looking at you, right? Society is still looking at you saying, hey man, you're a businessman, but on the other side, it's, the taxman is saying, hey chief, where's my money, right? The employees are saying, yo, where's my money? The landlord is saying, you haven't paid for the office. So I think that baptism by fire was quite testing. And I really had to really build a lot of resilience. But I'm grateful for it, because who you become at the other side of it is absolutely incredible.
Yeah. So in hindsight, you can see why it was necessary to go through all those seasons.
Yes, but I think, so I always say, if I had become an entrepreneur in my 40s, it would be different. I'm very cautious about being an entrepreneur too early.
Oh, that's interesting. So you think, just so I'm hearing you correctly, so you're saying that if you started your entrepreneurship journey at 40, it would have panned out better than it is right now. Is that what I'm getting?
Yes, definitely.
Interesting.
Definitely. I had no business becoming an entrepreneur at 27.
You know why I'm saying that's interesting? Because I know some who would argue that we're not starting early enough. We are not failing enough to get to success. When I then get to 40, I'm able to apply the lessons learned, right?
Yeah.
Into that which then becomes successful at 40. So I know a couple of schools of thought that say we are not starting early enough on our entrepreneurial journey. So I would be interested to know why you think at 40 is the sweet spot. Obviously, 40 might not be the exact figure. You're just saying in terms of having years on your belt.
Because while failure is important, failure is also a privilege.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is simply that sometimes you don't have the luxury of failure. That if you fail, there are so many people behind you who will be impacted by your failure. And so you need to mitigate that risk. So if you are in a situation where your failure means your family will be financially impacted and your extended family, there's a mom at home, a dad at home who's like, yo, we need, you have to help us out here. Your brother can't go to school if this thing doesn't work. I think in those circumstances, you need to take the path of least resistance.
Okay.
And to be quite frank, for most Black people, I think that path is stay in viable formal employment for as long as possible, and use that revenue, that income, to fund the business. But even then, to the best of your abilities, run them in parallel.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yeah.
Also, what tends to happen is the connections I have now in my late 30s are completely different to the connections I had in my 20s. I knew people, but I knew people, or they knew me from the lens of a 20-year-old or a 25-year-old. So their level of trust, their ability to give me opportunities was limited. Also, my peers were not in a position to give me opportunities. You know, business in Africa is very much dependent on relationships.
Yes.
So I might know you, you're in corporate, but you being in your 20s, the economic upside of the relationship at this stage is limited. It's not to say you can't benefit me, but who you will become at 35, at 40, now you are leader of this, head of that, executive of this. Now we can have a conversation and be like, oh, okay, look, well, you know, actually I have this enterprise, you know, can we collaborate? You know, it would be unfair for me to expect that of you now in your 20s. So that's why I say when I was in my 20s, I was trying to, you know, do these things. I was calling my friends, hey man, can you help me out? I'm trying to pitch for that thing that your company has, whatever. And it's like, dude, I'm not even in the room when that decision is being made, you know? They're only starting to get into the room now in their late 30s. But if you have a safety net, if you have the luxury of failure, then yeah, start young, try.
Interesting. Thanks so much for sharing that perspective tonight. And yeah, a lot to take in there. With our final question, right? I wanna touch a bit on legacy, right? When it's all said and done, right? What would you like the community, your family, your friends to speak about Tendai when Tendai Luwo's name is mentioned? What do you hope they'll remember the most when Mr. Luwo's name comes up? What do you hope that comes first, top of mind?
I think for my family, if they can look back and feel like they were seen.
Okay.
You know, seen and heard. So by seen, I mean, can my family feel like they were able to show up as authentically as they are and not have to be a different version of themselves? You know, because I think a lot of us struggle with feeling invisible in our homes, right? You're like, oh, you know, my mom doesn't know the real me. You know, I'm not saying that's what I'm not saying that's, you know, my parents but I do think visibility is a hidden wound for a lot of people. And then being heard, right? Can my kids say, when I spoke up, when I said something, I was listened to in its entirety, you know? So I would love for that, just to feel that, you know, they were seen, they were heard, and they were loved.
Yeah.
I think from a community perspective, it's not so much for people to say, oh, you know, Mr. Luwo, I'm not, I just want to help as many people as possible.
I hear you.
Right? So I've always said, through God's grace, I've been placed in rooms that I don't even know what I was doing in those rooms. And I want to take all those lessons, all those observations and say, guys, this is what I've seen out there. And so if people can be like, oh, I learned this, I picked up that, I implemented this and it helped, I'm happy.
That's amazing. That's such a human answer, man. I really like that. Yeah. I like how the visibility part in particular. You know, I think a lot of people want to be remembered for various things, but The fact that you want your family, when they think of their father, their brother, their son, you want them to remember you as somebody that made them feel seen. It's such a powerful sentiment to the kind of person you are. And I just want to say thank you for your time, Tendai, for sharing your wisdom, your experiences, and also sharing your heart with us today on the platform. I myself have learned a lot. And my hope to the people who are watching at home is that this conversation has challenged you and it's encouraged you to be a person that leads with purpose and that serves with humility, and that day by day you can continue to become the person that you aspire to be, and to be intentional about how you live your life. And if this conversation has spoken to you, has inspired you, I encourage you to subscribe, to like, and also share it with a brother who needs to hear this conversation. Until next time, this is the Forefathers Podcast. We hope that you continue to grow, you stay grounded. We'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.